What would you do if the person who smiled and toasted to your family's future was actually the one sharpening a blade for your legacy? Imagine watching a woman you trusted sip champagne in the seat you built and discovering she never intended to say thank you. She planned to take everything. This is the story of how I watched that plan unfold, stayed silent while the trap closed, and turned a secret clause into the quietest, most devastating kind of justice. They said it with a laugh, the kind that landed like acid. "Oh, we got married last night," Vivienne said on the phone, voice silk and nails. "It was for VIPs only, VIPs. Her smirk was audible. She wanted it to sting. She wanted me to know she had excluded the family, the very people who had built the life she now called hers. I felt the knife. It slid into the place I had always kept soft for my son, but I did not show it. I had learned, over the years, that haste makes noise, and noise spoils the game. I smiled into the receiver and let her think she'd won. When Vivienne first entered Oliver's life, I wanted to believe the best. He was a small, brilliant boy once, and I raised him under the impression loyalty and labor would be returned with gratitude. I watched her for signs. Charming, yes. Ambitious, absolutely. Generous in public, always. But there's a way someone smiles when they are counting a ledger in their head, and I saw it early. The way her eyes brightened when the conversation turned to property, to names on papers, to villas and titles. She spoke of money like it was air. Oliver was in love. He saw a partner. I saw a predator wearing perfume and silk. Predators don't stop because you ask them to. They stop when they meet something they don't expect. A plan, a law, a signature that bites back. I did not confront her that day. Confrontation is loud and often leaves you with fewer options. Instead, I watched. I let her play Queen of Secrets while I reshuffled the board quietly, meticulously. For years I had prepared for fools and foxes. The world makes both, but I had also prepared for family. When I bought that waterfront villa, when I arranged the trust, I did it so the house, the lands, and a good portion of what I had built would remain under a single, ironclad structure. My lawyers rolled their eyes at what they called paranoia. I called it insurance. The trust papers were written under the name Whittaker Family Trust. Oliver's name could not, and would not, receive a simple transfer of the villa without a family review. There were clauses written in the dry, unromantic language of law, but sharp as razors in intent. One clause in particular was for people who believed weddings could be whispered into corners. Any heir who contracted marriage without family notice and presence would forfeit immediate claim to any trust property until the trustees completed a formal review and confirmation. A procedural check on its face. A guillotine in practice for those who thought they could sneak a signature into a midnight champagne toast. Vivienne never read the trust. She would not. People like her believe other people's signatures are just ink until the moment the ink bites back. So when she called, triumphant, asking whether the keys had been sent to their villa, I let the silence stretch. I enjoyed that silence the way you savor a final note in a long, difficult piece of music. It unnerved her. You could hear the champagne fizz in the background and her breath quicken. "Oh, did I forget to mention the condition?" I asked finally, my voice smooth. The cockiness drained from her like a shadow at noon. "What condition?" she demanded. Her tone was brittle, the edges sharp. I explained it slowly, deliberately. Not to humiliate, there will be time for humiliation to do what it does rather to instruct. The trust, I said, prevents any transfer of title or keys when a marriage is contracted without family notice. Full stop. It's in plain language, Vivienne. You opted for secrecy. You excluded the family. That was a choice. The trust forces a review. At present, the villa remains in trust. There are three reactions people have when reality collapses against their plans: the furious fight, the shocked silence, and the desperate scream. Vivienne tried a laugh that broke halfway through. "You can't," she stammered. "You will have to." Her threats were thin paper. I cut them with the fact that the papers were filed, signed, and witnessed years ago. I ended the call without a flourish. That was a lesson I had learned. The quiet end of a sentence is always harder to argue with than the noise at its beginning. 2 days later, she arrived with suitcases stacked like a small city, her designer sunglasses hiding panic, Oliver's arm wrapped in a grip that suggested ownership more than affection. The gates of the villa closed like a mouth. Security, following orders from counsel who had read the trust in the same way I had, refused entry. I watched from the study window as the scene unfolded. Vivienne screaming, lawyers being threatened, her confidence crumbling into a combustible mess of threats and bluster. She waved my son's name like a talisman, as if invoking him would unlock doors that were legally bolted. The guards, polite but firm, produced the archaic, certain language of the trust. No transfer without review, no keys would be handed over. And then the most delicious sound in the world, the sudden silence of Oliver. That silence was not his usual youthful sheepishness. It was the stunned hush of a man realizing a continent he thought he stood upon was built on someone else's rocks. He had married his wife, not his inheritance. She had married his name and his charm. She had not married what his name would buy her. I didn't gloat. Gloating is the public's sport. Revenge is an opera, methodical, layered, quietly devastating. I did what any man who had spent decades building something would do. I offered Oliver a choice with the blunt, sober face of reality. "You can build a life with her," I said to him when finally he stepped forward, voice lost. "You can choose that, but you will build it on your own 2 feet. You will not take my blood or my work and call it your own. If you want the villa, we will not hand it to you because of a ceremony you hid. If you want it, you will earn it through work or patience, not through secrecy." He looked at me then, not with the blind worship of a boy, but with the new, awkward clarity of a man who sees indicator lights go on in a car he thought he understood. He faltered. The seeds of doubt that I planted in him in that silence began their small, painful work. Vivienne continued to lash out in public, to smear my name, to rally friends who loved to back a loud horse. But the castle of arrogance she'd been constructing was beneath scrutiny now. Word travels faster than cash. People who gossip have a short and hungry memory for detail. Her arrogance had made her careless. She had assumed the world would draft itself in her favor without reading the fine print. There are few theatrical delights more satisfying than watching a predator discover the prey is not prey at all. But I will say this plainly, the satisfaction was not a scream of triumph. It was a quiet, complicated thing. The trust did what it was designed to do. It protected the assets and slowed the hand of a schemer long enough for the truth to sift through. As the weeks went by, Oliver began to ask questions that had been taboo. He asked about the history of the trust, about why certain clauses existed, about why I had structured the estate the way I did. He listened when I told him about the long nights of worrying about mortgages and taxes, and whether the family would cling together if tempted by easy money. That conversation, more than any decree, began to shift him. Vivienne, of course, worked to mend the breach in ways she could. Charm, excess, gifts, any thin veneer that might turn an inconvenient legal reality into something manageable. She forgot how reputations are not only built by glittering entrances, but also by the steady record in the courthouse and the whisper of neighbors. People began to look sideways. Her circle narrowed. The VIPs who had attended her secret wedding moved on when the scandal required them to choose between social cachet and moral cleanliness. They chose their cocktails over trouble. I cannot claim to have rescued my son from himself. That would be immoral. He must walk his own path. What I can claim is that I refused to be used as an instrument of someone else's greed. My silence at the beginning was not passivity, it was calculation. I had played a long game precisely because the long game spares you the short, brutish theatrics that leave scars and regret. There was an odd, small mercy in the entire affair. Once Oliver faced the possibility that he had been married to a contract rather than a companion, his heartbreak redirected itself. He discovered, slowly, the contours of his own dignity. He began making choices that were the product of his own will, not of a hand clasped too tightly around his wrist. Today, Vivienne hovers, desperate and thinly veiled in charm, trying to claw back what she thought was owed. Doors close in this town with the soft decisiveness of a judge's gavel. People withdraw favors. The gossip tumbles, her arrogance is the reason. And my son, he is learning, painfully and honestly, what it means to stand in the light of accountability. I speak to him sometimes, not as a judge, but as a man who made mistakes and learned to build protections. I tell him plainly that he may build his life with whomever he wishes, but he cannot build it on the theft of others. He must understand that inheritance without labor is a fragile thing, more fragile than any diamond in a vault. They thought excluding the family would buy them privacy and speed. They were wrong. They believed silence was their ally. They forgot the quietest instruments are also often the sharpest. The claws that cut them off was merely ink and years of foresight. It was not vengeance by spectacle. It was the law doing what it is meant to do, protect what was placed under its care. So that day when the line went dead, while Vivienne choked on the facts she never thought to ask about, I felt an old, calm satisfaction. Not cruelty, not triumph. A recognition that careful work, written down and guarded, can defend what love sometimes forgets to secure: permanence. People sometimes ask me if I regret the distance between my son and me during his early years. Regret is a heavy thing, and I carry some of it. But I do not regret building a structure, whether it be a home, a trust, or a set of values, that prevents the quick and dishonest from dismantling what generations have worked to assemble. In the end, there are many kinds of justice. Some are noisy and televised, some are quiet and written in clauses that only lawyers cheer over. I prefer the latter. It takes patience to let a trap close without dancing on the carcass. It takes greater courage to walk away and let the law do the breaking. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that sometimes the smartest answer to betrayal is silence wrapped in preparation, please subscribe to Tales Between Time for more stories of measured resolve, family conflict, and the clever ways people protect what matters most. Thank you for listening.